The Kansas heat beat down mercilessly that August afternoon in 1943. Sergeant Hiroshi Tanaka sat in the prison mess hall, staring at something impossible. Steam rose from the small bowl before him, vanilla ice cream with condensation dripping down the sides. He couldn't move, couldn't process what he was seeing. This was wartime. This was captivity. This was supposed to be punishment. But here sat real ice cream, cold and creamy and utterly impossible. In Japan, even generals rarely tasted such luxuries. Ice was precious. Refrigeration was a dream. Ice cream belonged to fairy tales and peacetime memories. Yet American guards were serving dessert to their enemies. Every single day. How had it come to this? 3 months earlier, Tanaka had been fighting Marines on blood-soaked Pacific islands. Death surrounded him. Hunger was constant. Rice mixed with sawdust filled his belly when he was lucky. The Bushido Code demanded death before surrender. But an American shell had knocked him unconscious during the battle. He woke up in enemy hands, expecting torture, expecting execution. Instead, he found cushioned train seats, regular meals during transport, medical care for his wounds. The Americans treated him like a human being. This defied everything Japanese propaganda had taught him. Americans were supposed to be savage monsters, soft and decadent people who would crumble under pressure. But the evidence suggested exactly the opposite. Now, 425,000 prisoners filled camps across America. Most were German, but thousands of Japanese soldiers like Tanaka discovered a world that shattered every assumption about their enemies. The journey to understanding this abundance begins on December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor changed everything, not just for America, but for the prisoners who would eventually taste American generosity. Japan had been at war since 1931, first Manchuria, then China, then the Pacific. Total mobilization meant total sacrifice. Every grain of rice went to the war effort. Every ounce of steel fed the military machine. Japanese civilians survived on 1,800 calories per day when they were lucky. Rice got mixed with sawdust and tree bark. Sugar became a peacetime memory. Meat existed only in dreams. Meanwhile, America faced its own wartime restrictions. Coffee required ration stamps. Sugar was limited. Victory gardens sprouted in backyards across the nation. But American rationing operated on a scale of plenty that Japanese families couldn't imagine. When Americans complained about 2 pounds of sugar monthly, Japanese mothers hadn't tasted refined sugar in years. When housewives grumbled about margarine instead of butter, Japanese families had forgotten what either looked like. This wasn't just about resources. It reflected two completely different war philosophies. Japan embraced total sacrifice. Every citizen must prove devotion through deprivation. America discovered that abundance could be a weapon. Maintaining civilian morale was crucial for a global war effort. American ice cream production continued throughout the war. The Navy built floating ice cream factories. Yes, floating ice cream barges to serve Pacific troops. While Japanese soldiers rationed meager rice portions, America was building dessert delivery ships. The first Japanese prisoners arrived in early 1942. Small groups, captured after Pearl Harbor and early campaigns. Their numbers stayed low because of Japanese military culture. Surrender meant ultimate dishonor. Death in battle was preferable to captivity's shame. Most captured Japanese were unconscious from wounds. Others couldn't resist due to injuries. Many woke in American hospitals expecting death. Instead, they found medical care, proper treatment, basic human dignity. Transportation to prison camps revealed more surprises. Passenger trains with clean windows and regular meals. No cattle cars, no death marches, just decent treatment that contradicted every propaganda story. Nothing prepared them for the camps themselves. American POW facilities operated under Geneva Convention guidelines. Prisoners received the same rations as American soldiers. What Japanese captives didn't understand was that American troops ate better than Japanese officers. The barracks seemed luxurious compared to Japanese military housing. Clean, heated, weatherproofed buildings. Each prisoner got a bunk with mattress, blankets, and personal storage. Compared to overcrowded, disease-ridden conditions back home, this felt like paradise. But the food truly shattered every preconception. That first meal became a moment of cultural shock. Men who subsisted on thin soup and rice handfuls suddenly faced plates of roasted meat, fresh vegetables, and soft white bread. Then came the dairy products. Milk appeared daily. Real cow's milk. Many prisoners had never tasted it. Japan's agricultural system relied on rice, vegetables, and fish. Dairy played virtually no role in traditional diet. That first sip brought suspicion, then wonder. Americans had so much milk, they served it to enemies. Butter, cheese, eggs appeared regularly. Products so rare in Japan they existed mainly in old memories. But ice cream symbolized American abundance most powerfully. Imagine being 19 years old, raised where every grain of rice was precious, where your mother watered soup to make it last, where childhood's greatest treat was hard candy shared among siblings. Now imagine being served ice cream by your supposed enemies. Prison canteens stocked items unavailable in Japan for years. Cigarettes, beer, chocolate, ice cream. Prisoners could purchase these with wages from camp labor. Tanaka's first ice cream encounter stopped him cold. He watched vanilla slowly melt in Kansas heat, trying to process what this meant about his captors. In Japan, ice was luxury. Refrigeration existed in major cities only. Mechanical freezing for dessert was unthinkable during wartime. Yet here, in enemy prison camps, mess sergeants served ice cream regularly. Other prisoners had similar reactions. Corporal Kenji Yamamoto, captured at Guadalcanal, later wrote about his first chocolate ice cream at Camp Robinson, Arkansas. He couldn't understand how Americans struggling in Great War could waste milk, sugar, and labor on such luxury for prisoners. Either their propaganda about sacrifice was false, or their country possessed unimaginable wealth. The truth leaned toward the latter. American military doctrine took Geneva Convention obligations seriously. Treating prisoners well encouraged surrender, potentially shortening conflicts and saving American lives. But beyond legal requirements, something uniquely American created this abundance. Even under rationing, American food production operated on industrial scales Japanese planners never contemplated. The U.S. fed 140 million citizens while supplying Britain under Lend-Lease, feeding millions of Allied troops worldwide, and maintaining exports to neutral nations. Despite massive demand, American farms produced surpluses. Ice cream production illustrates this perfectly. The Navy invested $1 million in floating ice cream factories during World War II. American military didn't just tolerate ice cream production, it promoted ice cream as essential for morale. American soldiers expected ice cream in field rations, base mess halls, and naval vessels. Famous ice cream barges served Pacific Fleet personnel. These became symbols of American determination to maintain quality of life in combat zones. For Japanese prisoners, this was both humbling and terrifying. If America could afford ice cream for enemies, what did that suggest about American war capacity? How could Japan defeat a nation so wealthy it treated luxuries as necessities? Every aspect of prison routine revealed the gulf between Japanese and American societies. Consider breakfast. Japanese soldiers got rice, pickled vegetables, and weak tea when available. American POW camps featured eggs, bacon, toast with butter, fresh fruit, and real coffee. Not the chicory substitutes Japanese civilians had drunk for years. The portions were staggering. American doctrine emphasized nutrition as essential for health, even among prisoners. Japanese POWs often couldn't finish meals. Their stomachs, used to near-starvation rations, couldn't handle the volume. Weight gain became common. Men arrived gaunt and malnourished from inadequate rations. Within weeks of American captivity, they began filling out. Medical records document average weight gains of 20 to 30 pounds during prisoners' first year. Physical transformation accompanied psychological changes. Japanese prisoners struggled to reconcile beliefs about American society with daily reality. Many had been told Americans were soft, decadent people who would collapse under war pressure. Evidence suggested exactly the opposite. A society so robust it could afford generosity toward enemies. Work assignments provided another window into abundance. Japanese prisoners typically did agricultural labor, maintained facilities, or worked in kitchens. These jobs offered first-hand views of American methods and distribution systems. Kitchen workers were particularly astonished by food waste. Portions that would feed entire Japanese families for days got thrown away for growing slightly stale. American production scales meant minor spoilage was acceptable rather than catastrophic. As 1943 progressed into 1944, word of camp conditions began filtering back to Japan through prisoner exchanges and diplomatic channels. Descriptions seemed so impossible that military intelligence dismissed them as Allied propaganda. Ice cream for prisoners? Impossible. Daily meat rations for enemy soldiers? Unthinkable. But more reports arrived, corroborated by Red Cross inspections and neutral diplomatic observers. A disturbing realization dawned on Japanese military planners. If reports were true, if America truly possessed such overwhelming abundance that it treated enemies better than Japan treated its own people, then perhaps the Imperial Army had underestimated their opponent more catastrophically than anyone imagined. The ice cream wasn't just dessert. It was a symbol of industrial might, agricultural surplus, and social organization that suggested Japan might be fighting an unwinnable war. Tokyo, March 1944. Colonel Masahiko Takashita sat in a windowless room deep within Imperial General Staff headquarters. Intelligence reports made no sense. According to multiple sources, American POW camps served Japanese captives meals, exceeding Japanese field officers' rations. If accounts were accurate, enemy prisoners consumed more daily calories than most Japanese civilians had seen in 3 years of war. The final paragraph truly disturbed him. Prisoners reported regular servings of ice cream, chocolate, and fresh dairy products. American commanders considered these items essential rather than luxury goods. Ice cream for prisoners of war. The colonel hadn't tasted ice cream since before the China incident began in 1937. His children had never experienced such delicacy. Yet Japan's captured soldiers, men who brought shame through surrender, were enjoying luxuries beyond loyal Japanese citizens' reach. The implications were staggering. Reports created unprecedented intelligence challenges for Japanese planners. How do you process information that undermines fundamental assumptions about your enemy? Since the early 1930s, Japanese propaganda portrayed America as soft, materialistic individuals who would crumble under sustained warfare pressure. Pearl Harbor was premised partly on this belief that Americans, lacking Japanese spiritual discipline, would seek negotiated peace after initial defeats. Evidence from POW camps suggested something entirely different. A society so robust, so abundantly supplied, that it afforded generosity toward enemies while fighting global war on two fronts. Psychological warfare implications were immediate and troubling. If word spread among Japanese troops, would it encourage surrender? Would soldiers view capture not as ultimate disgrace, but as a path to better living conditions than peacetime Japan offered? Japanese military censors faced an impossible task. They could suppress reports about POW conditions, but couldn't erase evidence when exchanged prisoners returned, carrying extra weight and stories of American abundance. Red Cross inspections by neutral observers, including Swiss diplomats, filed detailed reports with international organizations. Documents circulated through diplomatic channels, painting consistent pictures of American camps exceeding Geneva Convention requirements. One Swiss inspection report from Camp Concordia, Kansas, noted prisoners received 3 full daily meals, including meat, vegetables, dairy products, and dessert. Kitchen facilities were modern and sanitary. Recreational activities included sports, educational classes, and entertainment. Medical care appeared comprehensive. Clinical language couldn't mask revolutionary implications for Japanese readers. If neutral observers confirmed America treated enemy prisoners better than Japan treated its own people, what did that suggest about relative societal strength? As 1944 progressed, detailed accounts emerged from Japanese prisoners about American camp daily life. Stories initially dismissed as enemy propaganda became harder to ignore as they accumulated into consistent narratives of abundance. Corporal Ichiro Sato, captured during Marshall Islands campaign, spent 18 months at Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. Detailed letters to family members, smuggled through neutral diplomatic channels, provided unprecedented windows into American POW life. Americans wake us with breakfast bells at 6:30, Sato wrote. We line up for eggs, real eggs, sometimes 3 per man, with fried pork strips they call bacon. There's bread with butter, seasonal fruit, and milk, always milk. I've gained 30 pounds since arriving. Sato's most remarkable observations concerned American attitudes toward food waste. Yesterday, I watched kitchen workers throw away entire loaves because they'd grown slightly hard. In our village, such bread would be treasured, soaked in water to soften, shared among several families. Here they toss it to birds and bake fresh loaves. Another prisoner, Sergeant Takeshi Nakamura, captured at Saipan, described shock at American camp canteen systems. Prisoners could purchase additional food items using wages earned from camp labor. Typically, 25 cents daily for agricultural work. With weekly earnings, I can buy chocolate bars, cigarettes, and sometimes ice cream, Nakamura reported. These items cost more than many Japanese families spend on monthly food. Yet American prisoners, their own captured soldiers in German camps, receive packages containing such luxuries regularly. The canteen system revealed another dimension Japanese prisoners found incomprehensible. Not only were American POW camps well supplied, but American families could afford sending luxury items to captured relatives overseas. Care packages from American families often contained coffee, chocolate, canned meat, cigarettes, and personal items impossibly expensive for most Japanese families, even during peacetime. Japanese prisoners witnessed American POWs receiving these packages, sometimes sharing contents with former enemies. Casual generosity gestures spoke to abundance beyond Japanese understanding. Extended exposure to American abundance produced profound psychological changes among Japanese prisoners. Men raised in cultures glorifying sacrifice and deprivation suddenly found themselves in environments where plenty was taken for granted. Transformation was both physical and mental. Medical records document not just weight gain among Japanese POWs, but improvements in general health indicators. Dental problems common among Japanese soldiers due to poor nutrition began resolving. Vitamin deficiency diseases plaguing Japanese military units disappeared within months of American captivity. More significantly, Japanese prisoners began questioning fundamental assumptions about their society and war. Many had been told Japan's material sacrifices were necessary because the entire world suffered under wartime restrictions. Rationing, substitute foods, constant shortages were presented as universal conditions all nations endured during global conflict. American POW camps shattered this narrative completely. If Americans could serve ice cream to enemies while fighting wars on multiple continents, then perhaps Japanese civilians endured unnecessary hardships. Perhaps their leaders made choices prioritizing military production over human welfare in ways not actually required for victory. These realizations created what camp psychiatrists termed cognitive restructuring, the painful process of rebuilding reality, understanding, when confronted with evidence contradicting core beliefs. Some prisoners handled this better than others. Men with strong family connections often focused on survival and return, viewing improved conditions as temporary good fortune. But younger soldiers, particularly those who'd known only wartime conditions in Japan, sometimes underwent more dramatic transformations. Prison camp educational programs, permitted under Geneva Convention guidelines, provided additional cultural exchange opportunities. Japanese prisoners attended English classes, learned American history and government, and participated in recreational activities unknown in their previous lives. Baseball became a particularly significant cultural bridge. Many Japanese prisoners had heard of the sport but never played. American camp guards organized leagues, including both prisoners and staff, creating informal relationships transcending the captor-captive dynamic. These interactions humanized Americans in ways contradicting years of dehumanizing propaganda. It's difficult viewing someone as subhuman monster when they're teaching curveball technique or sharing ice cream rations. Perhaps no single element of American wartime abundance seemed more impossible to Japanese prisoners than stories of floating ice cream barges serving American troops in the Pacific. Yet these stories were not only true, but represented deliberate American strategy to maintain morale through familiar comforts. The Navy's ice cream initiative began in 1942, when military planners recognized that traditional morale-boosting activities, shore leave, entertainment, familiar foods, were impossible during extended Pacific campaigns. Unlike European theater, where American troops could occasionally visit London or Paris, Pacific warfare meant months at sea or on remote islands with no recreational opportunities. Ice cream became the solution. The Navy constructed specialized refrigeration ships capable of producing thousands of gallons daily. These vessels, nicknamed ice cream barges, followed Pacific Fleet, delivering frozen treats to combat units wherever they operated. Operation scale was staggering. At peak, the Navy's ice cream program produced over 5,000 gallons daily for distribution to ships and island bases. Flavors ranged from vanilla and chocolate to strawberry and exotic tropical fruit combinations made from local ingredients. Japanese prisoners learned about ice cream barges from American personnel and intelligence reports filtering through camp administrations. Psychological impact was devastating to Japanese morale. Here was concrete evidence that America possessed not just military superiority, but such overwhelming abundance it could dedicate entire ships to producing dessert for troops. While Japanese soldiers rationed rice and mixed sawdust into bread, American forces complained about daily ice cream ration quality. The contrast became darker when prisoners learned about American combat rations. K rations, standard American field meals, contained chocolate bars, coffee, cigarettes, and canned meat. Luxuries Japanese officers rarely saw. C rations included canned peaches, beef stew, and crackers that would have been feast-quality food for Japanese troops. American soldiers complained constantly about these rations, viewing them as barely acceptable substitutes for proper meals. Japanese prisoners listening to these complaints realized what Americans considered inadequate food was superior to what Japanese forces received as standard rations. By late 1944, cumulative psychological impact of American abundance was becoming visible in Japanese military performance. Intelligence reports noted increased surrender rates among Japanese troops, particularly in hopeless situations. Traditional death before dishonor mentality characterizing early Pacific battles was weakening. Soldiers who might previously have fought to the last bullet began considering surrender as rational alternative to pointless death. This shift wasn't universal or dramatic, but noticeable enough to concern Japanese military leadership. Reports from various Pacific commands noted instances where Japanese soldiers actively sought capture rather than participating in final banzai charges. Reasons were complex, but POW camp condition stories played roles. Word spread through Japanese units that American capture might not result in torture and execution, but rather better living conditions than many soldiers had experienced in entire lives. For Japanese military commanders, this represented catastrophic fighting spirit breakdown. If soldiers began viewing enemy captivity as preferable to continued service, the entire foundation of Japanese military discipline would collapse. Desperate measures followed. Military police increased troop surveillance for defeatist thinking signs. Soldiers caught discussing POW camp conditions faced severe punishment. Prisoner communication censorship became stricter, but information spreads despite official suppression. Soldiers talked quietly among themselves. Letters found ways around censors. Ice cream and abundance stories circulated as underground rumors no amount of military discipline could eliminate. Meanwhile, on Japanese home front, families began piecing together disturbing information about war's true progress. Contrast between official propaganda about American weakness and POW camp condition reports created cognitive dissonance, becoming harder to ignore. Mothers who hadn't seen fresh milk in years learned captured sons were drinking it daily. Fathers working 12-hour factory shifts heard American prisoners were playing baseball and attending educational classes. Children who'd forgotten sugar's taste discovered their government's enemies were serving dessert to Japanese captives. Psychological impact rippled through Japanese society in subtle but significant ways. If America could afford such generosity toward enemies, what did that suggest about Japan's victory chances? If American society was so abundantly supplied, it could maintain peacetime living standards during global war. How could Japan hope to outlast such an opponent? These questions couldn't be asked openly, but influenced private conversations and personal decisions. Factory workers began questioning whether their sacrifices were truly necessary if American workers were apparently living comfortably. Farmers wondered why their food production was insufficient when American camps seemed to have unlimited supplies. Home front morale erosion wasn't dramatic or immediate, but steady and irreversible. Each new POW camp condition story added another crack to Japanese wartime unity foundation. As 1945 dawned, and Japan's military position became increasingly desperate, American abundance's true significance became unmistakably clear. Ice cream served to Japanese prisoners wasn't just dessert. It was evidence of industrial capacity, agricultural surplus, and social organization, Japan couldn't match even at full wartime mobilization. Floating ice cream factories, well-supplied POW camps, casual waste of food that would have been treasures in Japan, all pointed to fundamental truth Japanese leadership had been reluctant to acknowledge. They were fighting an opponent whose resources dwarfed their own to almost incomprehensible degree. The shock Japanese prisoners experienced eating ice cream in American camps represented more than cultural surprise. It was the moment when many Japanese soldiers first understood the true scale of war they were fighting, and why their victory chances had been illusory from the very beginning. Abundance that seemed impossible to Japanese prisoners was simply normal American life, even during history's greatest war. That realization, more than any battle or bombing campaign, began the psychological process, ultimately leading to Japan's surrender. Today, looking back on this remarkable World War II history chapter, the story of Japanese prisoners shocked by American ice cream serves as powerful reminder of how material abundance can become a weapon more potent than any bomb. Ice cream served in American POW camps wasn't intended as psychological warfare, but became exactly that. It demonstrated American strength not through military might displays, but through casual generosity, revealing vast gulfs between Japanese and American industrial capacity. For Japanese prisoners who experienced this abundance firsthand, ice cream became a symbol of society so rich, so well-organized, and so confident in ultimate victory that it could afford kindness toward enemies. That kindness, perhaps more than any aggressive act, convinced many Japanese soldiers their war was unwinnable. Sometimes the most powerful weapons are not ones designed to destroy, but ones that reveal truth. The truth revealed by ice cream in American POW camps was that Japan had challenged an opponent whose strength lay not in willingness to sacrifice, but in capacity to provide abundance even amid global war. Young Japanese soldiers who sat in Kansas mess halls, staring in disbelief at vanilla ice cream bowls, were witnessing the future. A future where America's strength would reshape the Pacific, end the war, and create new world order built on abundance rather than sacrifice. That ice cream, cold and sweet, and impossibly generous, was nothing less than the taste of victory itself.